Welcome to Halal Money Matters. I'm Christopher Patton.
I'm Monim Salam.
We are not in the same room.
It's been a crazy time, Chris. I've been actually stuck at home since early March.
Yeah.
And just to let you know, in my entire life, this is the longest I've ever been without traveling anywhere.
Oh, yeah. I know you're quite a traveler. You have.
It's been really
I recently
weird.
learned you had a goal of the amount of countries that you wanted to visit in your life.
Yeah. So I'm at 72 right now, and I need to get to 100.
Yeah, well, this year's a bit of a setback, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's right.
And that actually feeds into this episode. We want to talk about Hajj, not just what is it, what's the obligation, what does it entail, what does it normally look like, and then what does this year look like? And then beyond that, what are the financial considerations, saving, and ideas for that, and strategies and that type of thing?
Yeah, we have a very special guest that we're going to be joined by. Imam Tahir Anwar from the Bay Area. Mashallah, he's an American Muslim scholar and a preacher. He's been in the Bay Area since 1983, but he was actually born in London, England. Very active in the San Jose Muslim community. He's been, a founder and a board member actually of an Islamic school there. He's a lecturer at Zaytuna College, and more importantly, I think he's been on multiple, I think for the past decade, he's been on every single Hajj. We're going to talk to him about this, but this is probably the first time in a long time that he's actually not gone and actually spent time with the family. So I'm really excited about the show.
Yeah, I'm very eager to learn about all the preparation that goes into it, and him being an authority on that element of things, and hear some of his experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what our listeners will really, also enjoy is going to be ways that they can actually save for Hajj towards the end of this presentation. Because, the costs are rising very rapidly above inflation. And not everybody can just, on a dime, just decide to pay to $12,000 to go. So how do we come up with strategies to do that would be good also.
Yeah. All right. Should we just dive into that then?
Let's do it.
All right.
Thanks, Imam Tahir, for joining us. Let's start off and just talk a little bit from an overall perspective about Hajj, and just from an Islamic obligation part of it, and what people should be expecting, those type of things.
Sure. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's of course it's very evident, and we all know that there's 5 pillars in Islam, and the last of which happens to be Hajj, pilgrimage to Mecca. And when I normally teach my annual workshop, what I end up telling people is that, as far as the Shahada, the first obligation, it's something that we learn and internalize at a very young age. Soon after we begin to pray our namaz, of course it becomes, the prayer becomes obligatory much later in life. But, in a Muslim family, you're probably starting to pray, or at least making the motions from a very early age, followed by fasting. And then at some point in life, you start paying your zakat, your alms. But this last pillar is really a big deal, because usually you've done all the other obligations by the time you get to this one. For most people, and for many people, it could be, after having performed the other obligations for decades by the time they get to make it for Hajj. Of course, things are a little different now. We get to see a lot more younger people at Hajj than, we've seen in the past, historically speaking, and even in the modern age. So, it's a moment of excitement, and it's fulfilling. You've always heard about fulfilling this pillar, fulfilling this obligation, and people have so many different circumstances, as a result of which, some people are not able to go sooner than later. And so when that moment finally does come, or you start thinking about it, or intending it, or preparing for it, it's a really, really big deal. And then, of course, the journey to modern day Saudi Arabia, and our journey to, Mecca and Medina, and then the outskirts of Mecca, where we perform the actual obligation. And you come back, of course, spiritually speaking, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, peace be upon him, reminds us that you come back as if the day your mother gave you birth. All your shortcomings and your sins have been forgiven. But not just that, but most people come back from Hajj with a renewed sense of purpose. for their own selves, for their families, for their communities. And so it's a pretty big deal. And the reality is that the amount of people that perform Hajj every year is well into the millions. So you have, millions of people performing Hajj and literally, changing their entire lives, not just after they come back from Hajj, but literally, preparing and going into going into Hajj.
It's really interesting, Imam Tahir. You mentioned this about, going at a later age in your life or going at a younger age. I think in the U.S., we kind of sometimes take it for granted that we can go whenever we want. When I was in Malaysia and lived there, I kind of found out they have a Hajj fund called Tabung Haji. Mm-hmm. And, people actually start when they're 20s, when they first start to work and they start putting money in. And when you start putting in, you get a number of a waiting list. And that waiting list is about 30 to 40 years long. Yeah. So even if they wanted to go earlier, they just couldn't do it. And so,
as an individual from America who gets to organize Hajj, I mean, we could sit here for hours and I could just share stories with you. But I'll share two very quick stories with you. We have a Uyghur family in our community, and it has not been possible for them to go for Hajj. And so this individual, as many immigrants want to land come here as students, want to land a job and then, get a green card. This individual's intent to get a green card and become a citizen was really just one. And it really wasn't, while part of it was to settle down in America, but he said, one of the greatest reasons why I want this is so that I can apply for my parents to come to America and then allow them to be able to go for Hajj from here, because they're not allowed to go, it's not possible for them to go for Hajj from where they are. So we really take it for granted. The other thing is that, yes, we are able to go really whenever we want. And the vast majority of, Muslims, educated Muslims at least, it's very easy. It's about, we're able to buy cars or lease cars and so on and so forth. If we just kind of put some of that money together, within a year or two, you could be ready and on your way to Hajj. But, I recall, and this is the second story, what I recall was, this was a few years ago, I was traveling from Makkah to Mina after we had performed our tawaf, and, we were all just crammed up in the back of a Land Cruiser. This was many, many years ago. And I still remember I met this elderly individual from Pakistan, and we began this conversation, and he made a very interesting point. He said that there's no way that Allah cannot accept my Hajj, my pilgrimage. It's a very bold statement, because generally we'll say things like, Allah, please accept my Hajj. But he was like, there's no. And so I asked him in Urdu, I said, Haji Sahib, how? And his response was that I have worked my entire life and collected my halal income to be able to perform Hajj. And at a very old age, I've been able to perform Hajj. And had I done things otherwise, I could have fulfilled this obligation earlier. But I wanted to make sure that every bit of income that I had used to fulfill my obligation was 100% halal. So yeah, you're right. We do take it for granted, where in many parts of the world, either they're not able to travel or they're not financially able to do so. Or just like you said, Malaysia, humongous waiting lists.
Well, yeah, that's right. Because the funny thing about the calculation of how people get visas, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's based on the population of your country, regardless of whether you're Muslim or not. Correct. So 300 million people has a certain formula. We have the same number of people going as Indonesia. Indonesia is 95% Muslim. We're like not even 2% Muslim. Right? Yeah. But that's the game. Not the game, but that's just how the numbers are run.
And so, the number, Allah has been kind enough to me to be able to be a part of Hajj preparations for almost the last 2 decades now. What I'm seeing is the number of people traveling to Hajj from the United States is definitely growing. And the number of younger people that are going is definitely growing, and this, like right now, we would be preparing for Hajj. So every day I'm having this conversation with some of my close friends, and and that this is what we would have been doing. So 2 weeks ago I was on my way to Dallas briefly, and my calendar had actually said Hajj workshop. And year after year, we hold this massive 6-hour, 300-person Hajj workshop, along with a massive breakfast and lunch. And, we go through about 90 slides. It's a really big deal. And the volunteers that have been doing this for the last, so many years really look forward to this day, like preparing for it and inviting all the people and seeing the excitement on their faces and all the questions that they have and sort of the worries that they have, and helping alleviate those fears. You're just there, and then kind of reminiscing that, it's about 2 weeks before we would have left for Hajj, which means right now we'd have been in the hustle bustle of receiving those passports, and someone reaching out and saying, I didn't get my ID, or when am I getting my passport, what's the FedEx track. I mean, this would have been it. And for me, truly, this is the journey of a lifetime, and being able to be a part of people's journey to Hajj. I generally know people in my community through two things. One, I've performed their nikah, or I've had the honor of performing Hajj with them. Like, that's literally how. And so it's kind of hard what we're going through right now. I'm almost kind of feeling a little teary here, just kind of missing all of that. But it's whatever the Almighty has planned for us is best for all of us.
No, that's so true. So what can you just give a quick, maybe a short summary of what you would be doing now, but what does Hajj look like in a traditional, thing?
Yeah. So, and this is the beauty about, Muslims in America. We like to prepare for things. We like to be, we like to make sure. So generally about 6 to 8 months before Hajj, people will start reaching out and say, hey, we're looking to go for Hajj. Start booking their airline tickets, start putting in their deposits, or even starting to, slowly give money towards, their payment. By Ramadan, we are usually collecting all the documents, passports, meningitis, pictures, and so on and so forth. And then about 4 to 6 weeks after Ramadan is when we start receiving the visas from the consulate, of Saudi Arabia to be able to travel. And so right around this time, about 2 weeks before our scheduled departure, we would be receiving our passports, the workshop, maybe even shopping for certain specific things. People have different needs: medical needs, physical needs, spiritual needs. You're trying to get that one, your hands on a certain mushaf that you've always wanted, or a book of dua that you've wanted, or a certain kind of a camping chair, or a certain kind of a water bottle, different things. And this is what we would be going through, a lot of questions. This is around the time when I would be fielding just a ton of questions via email on a daily basis from different people. And then, of course, we would travel to Hajj, depending on, we'd either go to Mecca first or Medina first, carrying our ihram, learning how to put on just the excitement, putting on our ihram, it not working out the first time you do it, feeling awkward wearing it. And then, of course, getting ready for Hajj. And, most American Hujjaj will end up going for anywhere between with travel time, about 15 and 20 days. That's usually the norm from the United States, unlike many other Muslim populated countries where you're probably coming for maybe 4 or 5, even up to 6 weeks. So it's usually for us, it's sort of kind of get in, be prepared and make sure you know what you're doing, do Hajj, and then immediately come back home. And of course, while we are there in Mecca and Medina, we're usually preparing, praying, and just a lot of reflection.
And it's interesting you mentioned this. I noticed also when I went for Hajj, is that, again, this is one of those things that we're blessed to be able to do that. A lot of people actually bring their wares, and they have to use Hajj as a trading opportunity to afford it and to be able to live even during those 2-3 weeks the 4 or 5 weeks that they're there.
So my own cousins who come from India, that their tour operator will tell them things like, you're allowed to take 2 bags per the airline, but you're only allowed to take 1. And the reason behind it is because the other bag or the other piece is usually some dry food item like lentils or rice or something along those lines that the tour operator is actually taking with them to Saudi Arabia, because in the hotels that they stay in, the tour operators are usually cooking for all the Hujjaj before the days of Hajj. So our experience, and I've compared my experience to that of many others over the years. Our experience as Americans going from the United States is a very, very different experience compared to the vast majority of the Hujjaj there, including locals, right? I've actually had locals that are slightly surprised at how much luxury we are afforded, because it's natural. You're thinking, well, it's my land, I'm the local, I should have all these privileges, but and there's nothing wrong with it. This is what Allah has decreed for us. This is Allah's nasib for us. And I tell people, we should not feel that there's any decrease in our Hajj or in our reward. This is just what Allah has decreed for us, and we're very grateful for what we've been given. Now that said, Hajj is no walk in the park. It is a grueling journey. It's in the summer these days, so it's hot there. Buses and trains running on time. Sometimes food is a little delayed. Logistics here and there. You can get ill, and so ultimately, I think that the way Allah has planned Hajj for everyone, that everyone goes through some level of sacrifice, regardless of how much luxuries they're afforded. As Americans, we are so used to taking certain things for granted. And some of those are sometimes taken away from us during the journey. And so that is our sacrifice. And for others, the things that we take for granted would have been luxuries to begin with. So they have different kinds of sacrifices. But ultimately, anyone and everyone that ever returns from Hajj, it's just the most powerful feeling in the world. And most people will say something like, how come I didn't do this earlier?
I mean, now that we've got kind of painted a picture here, what do you say to somebody who is dealing with, maybe was all geared up to go this year and is dealing with the disappointment of having that journey disrupted by COVID?
So, there's a lengthy conversation around the fact, oh my God, is Hajj going to be canceled? And some people will use language like Hajj has been canceled. First of all, there have been in our history, and in fact, I delivered an entire sermon around this 2-3 weeks ago. Historically, there have been many, many times where Hajj didn't happen at all. As a result of wars, as a result of plagues, as a result of diseases, or the amount of people that would be coming to Hajj would be heavily decreased as a result of certain diseases and so on and so forth. So has something like this happened in the past? Absolutely. The steps that the current administration in Saudi Arabia have taken to not allow for people from other countries to come for Hajj, I actually commend them. That is not an easy decision, but we are definitely seeing right here at home and in other parts of the world that what we thought would be something that we would be able to overcome in a few weeks is only coming back stronger. And the last thing we would want is people who are not so used to having hygiene, being on airplanes, masks, and so on and so forth. So I think I commend the administration for their decision. While I thought that the amount of people performing Hajj this year would be in the tens of thousands, I'm actually being told that it may actually be less than 10,000 in total, which is a really big deal compared to the millions. But to answer your quick question specifically, Chris, is definitely disappointment, tears, heartbroken. But honestly, we truly believe as Muslims that the Almighty, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has a plan for all of us and has a decree for all of us. And this is what was decreed for us. And as a result of our patience, right, because we're reminded that in times of difficulty, we're to remain strong and we're to be patient and ask God for assistance. And so, as a result of our patience, there's a reward in it for us. as a result of our patience. I truly believe that people that intended to go for Hajj, inshallah, they'll get a reward for Hajj. And in fact, because of their patience, their reward will be increased manyfold. And maybe as a result of their submitting to the will of God, to the will of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would bless them with the opportunity to do more Hajj in the future than that had been decreed for them earlier on. We don't know, right? We truly submit to Allah. And when we submit to Allah and say, Allah, this is a part of your plan, and if this is your plan, as much as I am upset and angry and feeling heartbroken, I submit to your plan. We truly believe that Allah will return that manyfold for us. And what I've been...
Go ahead. I was just going to say, it was interesting that you mentioned that, because if you made the intention for Hajj this year and not able to go, but then because of that, you're going to able to go next year, you've actually done 2 Hajj rather than 1.
Not just that, Mun'im, I truly believe that as a result of our patience, what if Allah says, you were so patient and you were so submissive to my decree that I'm going to allow you to perform 10 more Hajj before it's time for you to leave this world. We don't know. That's the beauty of our beautiful tradition, right? That we truly submit to Allah. As I was saying, in our community specifically, I've been telling people, yes, it's hard. I'm not denying it. But have we thought about the fact that we're still safe, healthy, in our homes? Things could be so much worse right now. I was at our local graveyard yesterday, and we had a COVID-related burial, and the brother who manages the graveyard, who helps with the burials, I asked him, and he said that this is only our second, and this is the larger, primarily Muslim graveyard in the Bay Area. He said, this is only our second COVID-related burial in the last 6 months. He goes, the first one was in January. So ever since things got really bad in March, this is only our second one. There's many Muslim communities who are battling with COVID-related deaths right here in our country. Let's not talk about the rest of the world. And our community is still, we're still so lucky. So yes, it's hard, but this is by the will and design of Allah. And then what are you supposed to do? Go for Hajj and God forbid get sick? Really? And you hear some people who are overly enthusiastic and saying things like, oh, I would much rather be in Hajj and pass away, things along those lines. But, our tradition teaches us to not go into harm's path. When we know that there's something that may be of harm to you, then, we're required, the preservation of life is something that we are required, and so it's just part of that plan.
It's kind of, but we joke around sometimes, but really it's like Hajj is for 2 weeks, but your recovery period afterwards is another 2 weeks, right? Like everybody gets sick.
It's a lot more than that.
Imagine having to go in this environment. So.
I jokingly tell people, if you don't get sick during Hajj, you're definitely going to get sick on the plane on the way back because of all the people coughing around you. And so can you imagine, God, Allah forbid, that if there was one person on that plane ride back home who was ill, and while you remain safe all the way through, we have to be careful.
That's true. So let me ask you a question. You're from California, Northern California.
Yes.
And I've visited them many times, and a lot of times, you go out and I say, wow, it's such a beautiful day. And Northern Californians don't even realize it because they have beautiful days every single day. So, you've been going for Hajj, mashallah, for a very long time. And maybe it's become something where like, oh, okay, it's another Hajj. But just one story, what is the one thing that you think you're going to miss the most about Hajj? Yeah.
Mun'im, you'll probably understand this a little more than Chris, but a very common question for a lot of people is, which one do you prefer, Medina or Mecca? Mecca is where the Grand Mosque is, and Medina is where the Prophet's tomb is. And while Medina has a very, very special place in my heart, and there's a lot of sukoon and tranquility there, and I love Medina, I'm not denying it. But over the years, I have truly come to accept the fact that I personally am a Mecca person. I enjoy the energy at the Kaaba, and just being there, you feel like you're in the presence of the Almighty. And I think that's going to be, there's a lot more I can say, and I'm going to add one more thing to that. But really, to answer your question, I'm going to miss seeing the Kaaba and just making tawaf around it. And then, of course, the dua on the day of Arafah, because the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, peace be upon him, reminds us that every prayer you make on Arafah is an accepted one. And when the sun sets on the day of Arafah, on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, all of your sins are forgiven. And people who perform Hajj fairly regularly, people take that for granted. And, some of us friends, we've been kind of talking, what are we going to do this year? And so, there's talks of fasting the first 9 days of Dhul Hijjah, and just kind of making sure that we do our part to continue to remain in gratitude and in a state of submission and obedience to the Almighty. But yes, that's going to be one. But, honestly, Mun'im, on a lighter note, and maybe, I am looking forward to spending time with my family. I'm making arrangements for the Eid al-Adha sacrifice. And it's so foreign to me right now. It's something that, it's like I'm kind of like looking for the right place, and because I haven't done it, in forever. And had it been safe to travel, I would have wanted to go to India to perform sacrifice there, because Eid al-Adha in a, largely Muslim populated country is very, very different. You get to be of service to people that are, not so privileged. But of course, we're going to be at home this year. So it's going to be different, inshallah. And I'm looking forward to it. And, alhamdulillah, I'm grateful.
I have one question. I watched one of your talks about religious identity, and you spoke about challenges for this and future generations in terms of protecting traditions. And you talked about, the increase in numbers of people making the pilgrimage, but do you think that as a practice, Hajj is strong, or can you foresee challenges there beyond COVID in the coming years?
I think the greatest challenge is going to be the number of people performing Hajj. The infrastructure, the ease. The current administration is very big on the Hajj experience. In other words, if a Haji had anything wrong happen to them, even by a menial worker in a hotel, and you picked up the phone and called the Hajj ministry, which is a very public phone number, the Hajj ministry and the government takes these things very, very seriously. So yes, I think that the number of people that are going there is going to cause, is going to be a real challenge. But I also think that, they are working towards alleviating some of those concerns, building entirely new airports. In the upcoming years, Jeddah Airport, which is where most people fly into, will actually be out of commission for Hajis. It'll all be directly arriving into Medina Airport, and then the new train system taking you to Mecca, and so on and so forth. So they're definitely thinking about this, and they have consultants that are helping them do this. So are there shortcomings? Absolutely. There's probably many, many shortcomings. But someone who has experienced this for the last 2 decades over my journeys there personally and professionally, I'll tell you that when it comes to the Hajj and Umrah experience, they've done a lot. As someone who believes, as a Muslim who has read about the Prophet and, has prayed towards the Kaaba in Mecca for years and years, to be able to just see that, be there, know that there's history attached to this, it's just spiritually very, very powerful. It sort of makes everything real, if you get what I'm trying to say. Like, it's real, it happened, it was here, this is what it is. And so it's really powerful. It's really powerful.
And part of the preparation, just kind of technical issues. I really liked your story about the person who had saved all of his halal income to be able to do that. But one question that I had was very technical. But a lot of us in America, have outstanding mortgages. We have auto loans and those type of things. What is the relationship between having debt and then going for Hajj?
There's varying opinions as to, what kind of debt you should or should not be looking at when it comes to things like paying zakat or performing Hajj. Generally, I like to remind people that any long-term debt that you have on which you're simply making your minimum monthly installments, be it a mortgage or a car payment, then that debt should not be taken into consideration as long as you have savings along with it. Now, clearly, if someone has a mortgage, and we will assume that it's a Sharia compliant mortgage, right, before someone jumps on this. But you have a Sharia compliant house mortgage, and every bit of your savings, monthly, annually, you're putting into your mortgage because you want to get rid of that, that debt sooner than later, and you have very little or no savings, then of course, no obligation at all. But ultimately, if you end up having savings, and many people do, we pay our mortgage, we make our car payments, we make our student loan payments, and despite that, we have savings. In fact, we have a substantial amount of savings because of the way our financial system has been set up here. And people use that money. When you have savings, you're going on vacation, you are buying a new car, whatever, however, it's your money. You can spend it however you like. And so if you are able to have those savings, then I personally believe that if you have savings enough for you to be able to perform Hajj, that Hajj becomes an obligation on you. And this is the opinion of the vast majority of the scholars in the West, that if you have savings despite your loans, then you should go for Hajj. Now, someone may say, well, I want to be completely debt-free before I go for Hajj. Then this would mean that you need to be actively working towards paying off your mortgage and not just making those minimum monthly payments and waiting for 15, 20, or 30 years or whatever it is, and then say, I'm going to go for Hajj then, right? If that's the case, then you might as well take all your bonuses and all your extra savings and curb down your regular day-to-day expenses and say, you know what, I'm going to pay off my loan in an X amount of years so that I can go and perform Hajj debt-free. That would be the way to do it. But if that's not going to be the case, then you should definitely, putting together, the average Hajj these days costs around $10,000 to $12,000, right? And so putting that kind of a money together for most people who are working and have decent jobs, it's a decent chunk of money. Don't get me wrong. But if we were to set our minds and hearts towards it and had a goal towards it, it's possible. I have a lot of younger couples who'll come to me and say, can you give us 6 months to pay the money? And every month, they become very principled in terms of their expenses and spending. And believe it or not, like 3.5, 4 months later, it's come through. I can share so many stories with you of people who made the intention, did not necessarily have the full means, but knew that somehow they would make it happen, and they made it happen. Chris, you had a question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the relationship between zakat and Hajj. And should zakat be paid before the saving for Hajj begins? And do you pay zakat on Hajj savings?
Yeah. Are you sure you're not Muslim? You just asked a very technical question. But of course, you've been in this line of work, so I wouldn't expect anything less of you. So the obligation of zakat comes before the obligation of Hajj. Because zakat is an annual obligation, and it's an obligation on money that you've already earned. As far as the obligation of Hajj, it only becomes an obligation if you are physically and financially able to perform it. So the obligation of zakat definitely comes before Hajj. And then, of course, Hajj is more of an individual obligation, where zakat is a communal obligation. And, we are required to look after our community. So that's another reason. As far as zakat on Hajj savings, so any savings that you have, whether they be for Hajj or otherwise, would be treated similarly as you would for zakat purposes, any other savings.
And then also the other thing is that, and we're getting into this now, would be, how do you begin to be able to save for that? And I think in the stories of you making your intention and trying to save that $12,000 within 6 months, obviously probably you have payments along the way that you need to make, so you need to keep that money very liquid. Yeah. And so opening up like a halal bank account, making sure the money is there, being invested, that's perfectly fine. But there are a lot of people who, are thinking, you know what, I can probably end up saving $50 to $100 a month, and it might take them a little bit longer to do that, which is perfectly fine.
Absolutely.
Because now as you begin to save that money, your intention is already there. Every
Mm-hmm.
month you're putting your money, your intention is there that you're going to be eventually
Mm-hmm.
doing that, whether it takes 5 years or even maybe even longer than that. Then you have other options besides just putting into the bank account.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because the cost of Hajj over the past, let's say 10 years has been far outpacing the inflation rate in the US. And so, if you're just going to be putting your money into the bank account, it's going to be a long time before you can really be able to afford it. And sometimes it's going to be something you're chasing after that you'll never be able to reach because your money's really not going.
In fact, what I would urge people to start doing, Mun'im, is that even if, I think as Muslims, everyone has a desire or plan to go for Hajj at some point. I'm not denying that. But for many people who haven't performed Hajj is nowhere in their near future. So it's not like, I don't see it in my upcoming 3, 4, 5 years. It would be smart of them to start putting money into a fund, $50 or $100 a month, for 2 reasons. First of all, this spiritually, right? Making this intention with Allah, with the Almighty, and saying, you know what? I've started a Hajj fund. And then Allah says, oh, you've done your part, let me do my part. So there's the spirituality. And then secondly, whatever amount of money you have put together, it could be a few $1,000s over the course of 3, 4 years or whatever. When the time does come for Hajj, this becomes a fairly significant chunk of that payment. And you would do nothing but thank yourself. And really all you did was start with, like you said, $50 a month or $100 a month that we could have been spending elsewhere. A lot of people like to give this Starbucks coffee example. I don't do that. Continue your coffee. I'm not saying stop your coffee. Please enjoy yourselves.
Yeah. Or maybe the other way to look at it is, when we're first starting off, the idea is, okay, I want to be able to save enough money to get married. I want to save enough money to be able to get my MBA or to buy a house or buy a car. I think part of that decision is to be, I'm going to start saving money now so that when I have enough, I'm going to go for Hajj, whenever that, that opportunity comes about.
Absolutely. And believe it or not, when we, in our deen, in our faith, in our tradition, we clearly know that intentions, our actions are judged by our intentions. And so if we are able to begin the intention, the Almighty will surprise you as to what that money would become from the time you have put it in. And, the amount of money you put in plus whatever else you made on it. And, come the time for Hajj, you may just be able to, as a result of your intention, say, oh my God, you know what? Not only can I go myself, my spouse can come with me. And if we just work a little harder, maybe one of our adult children can come with us. It's all in the intention, really. And the Almighty would surprise you with his, with his bounties, but making that intention and working towards it, not just making the intention, but actively working towards it would be very, very powerful.
Yeah, I think so. And I think just one thing to add to that, I think just from a mechanism perspective, I think, like I said, if you're planning on going for Hajj, saving enough money, you have the wherewithal to do it for this year or next year, leaving the money in a halal savings account is probably your best bet, right?
Yeah.
But I think if you're looking a bit long term than that, if you're a younger person, just a regular account where you can begin to save money, would be good, $50, $100 a month, and you'll be surprised because the money's going to keep growing based on the rate of the market. However, if you're older, one of the things that you can do, and I would recommend that because you can actually get some tax benefit from it, is to actually open up a Roth IRA and put money there to be able to eventually save for Hajj. And the reason why I say that is because the contributions into a Roth are actually, when you take it out after 5 years, you can take them out whenever you want. And if you're actually closer to the age of retirement, which is above 59 and a half, and a lot of people do go when they're older than that, then you can take all of the money out of your Roth account tax-free and be able to perform the Hajj. So it's actually a good method. So if you're 50, 55 years old, for 59 and a half, you can continue to work, but after that point, whatever money you take out of it is going to be something that's going to be tax-free for you to be able to do. The one thing that I did want to mention, Imam Tahir, is that we do have a Hajj calculator on our website. So you can actually go in and say, I'd like to be able to go for Hajj in 10 years based on the rate of whatever the return is. It'll tell you how much you should be saving
Oh, wow. That's really powerful.
for on a monthly basis to be able to do that.
It's just, facilitating it for people. And we save money for all kinds of things. Why not put our savings to use? And like you mentioned, if you have larger amounts of money that you want to set aside, and you can make a little bit of money off of it, or be able to save in taxes and so on and so forth, why not? It's always good to be smart with money, and there's ways around it.
So we talked about, now we've been talking about debt and savings and those type of things, and we kind of always caveat it with this idea of it has to be halal and that type of thing. But what if it's not? What if you do have a mortgage that's on a conventional? What if you're trying to save in a conventional bank or a conventional fund or something like that?
There's two things here. First of all, just because you have a conventional mortgage or a conventional interest-bearing loan, your income is still halal. You've just chosen to be, you have an opinion different than that of many others, and you have chosen to enter into a contract differently. But that doesn't mean your income is haram. That still means Hajj is an obligation. You could have an interest-bearing mortgage, and despite that, Hajj would still be an obligation, right? An interest-bearing mortgage does not negate the obligation of Hajj.
That's a good point.
Now, maybe the question could be, what if your income is haram? So what if, the money that you're making comes from avenues that, our Islamic law doesn't allow you to be in that kind of a profession? I would still, while it's very important and crucial that we use our halal income to go for Hajj, I would still say go for Hajj. Because, being in the presence of the Almighty, being in that state of submission, being in ibadah, and that day, most people come back completely renewed and refreshed. And, you will come back, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open the doors of His sustenance for you, so that the fear that you have of your sustenance in leaving the current work that you are in would become alleviated as a result of your dua at Hajj. Allah would open out of His bounty and blessings doors of rizq for you that you never thought or had seen available to you, but as a result of your Hajj and your dua on the day of Arafah, Allah opened those doors. So absolutely,
that's really. I think on the one side we talked about this idea of the non-compliant mortgages, and the obligation for Hajj doesn't go away. We talked about this idea of your halal income, and I think that was beautifully said, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will maybe give you that realization you need to change, and then open up the doors of risk. In the middle of it is also the idea that what do you do with the savings that you have, and how do you keep that halal? And there's many alternatives that are available to do that. So it's more a matter of kind of halfway in between, which is now you're saving the money. What do you do with that money as far as this? How do you save it? And like I said, there's multiple alternatives to be able to do something, save in a halal way, to be able to eventually lead you to that goal of being able to perform the Hajj.
Absolutely. So, just because someone's method of income is haram or doubtful, that doesn't mean that they can't do things with their money in the right way. Just because it's haram income doesn't mean, so it's almost like someone has a haram means of income, and now they're like, well, because my income is haram to begin with, I'm going to go to Vegas every month to gamble it all. It doesn't work that way, right? That person could still be contributing to good works and good causes, and I'm not, and as a result of that, Allah would say, you've done so much good that as a result of that, here, let me open the doors of my rizq for you, and so on. So it's always asking and seeking the mercy of the Almighty, and doing good with whatever we have, and then of course praying to Allah. I remember this was some years ago. I performed Hajj with an individual who owned some liquor stores, which unfortunately is common in our community. And he owned some liquor stores, and he just had this, and he didn't think much of it at the time. He would just argue and say, "This is my means of income. There's nothing else that I can do, and I have a family to raise," and so on and so forth. And he came to Hajj, and he just had this stark realization one day, and said that, "You know what? I'm going to make dua to Allah for Allah to change things for me." And lo and behold, he came back, and before you know it, he had opened up almost 36 cell phone stores. Over time, of course, but it was that prayer, it was that intention. And so we believe in divine assistance and divine mercy. So this should not negate that yes, if you have the option of using that income and putting it into a halal savings account or a halal investment account, absolutely. If you can go to perform something like Hajj, why not?
One thing that we face during this time right before the Hajj comes is people call us up and say, "Do you know of a good lawyer that can help me write my will?" Right? Because a lot of people want to take care of their affairs before that. Absolutely. But we know from a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that you shouldn't go 3 nights without writing a will. So my only encouragement, because hopefully we're going to get this out before the Hajj season, would be make those calls. I mean, take care of your will and your estate planning situation, even if you're not going to go for Hajj this year. It's something that's important to do.
And that type of thing. Very recently, in fact, about 10 days ago, I was speaking to a specialist when it comes to wills according to Islamic law. There's a lot of questions that need to be answered. There's a lot of just trying to figure out how you're going to make it happen and so on. So it's not as easy. A lot of people, and Munir, you know this far better than I do. A lot of people kind of go online, download this template that's available and just kind of sign it and think that they fulfilled their obligation. Clearly, you and I both know that's not going to stand in the court of law. There's just and it's not just about Islamic laws, but it's about the laws of the land that we live in, and making sure that it's done right. As far as the distribution is pretty simple, but even the distribution can be managed according to your desires to a certain extent. And people should know about this, so our children are well taken care of. So you're right. Even if you're not going for Hajj, you should work on it. In closing, what I would like to say is that Hajj is an opportunity that our generation has been afforded and made easy to us and for us far more than previous generations, and in many cases, including that of our own parents. And it should not be taken lightly. This opportunity to be able to perform Hajj and to do it sooner than later should not be taken lightly. And, while it may not be for you in the immediate upcoming years, it's something that, we should all pray for, think about, intend, and begin our preparations. One of the biggest preparations happens to be that of our being financially prepared for it. And so if there are opportunities where we can begin those, making it easy for us financially, then we should definitely start looking into those so that when the time comes, it would be so much more easier for us.
Thank you, Imam Tahir. I mean, I think I really enjoyed having a conversation with you about Hajj.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I really appreciate it. I know we're living through some unprecedented times, but, there is always we're people of hope. So there's always light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make this a success for us in ways we can't imagine. So, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, no problem. Thanks, and pleasure meeting both of you.
Okay, assalamu alaikum.
Take care. Wa alaikum assalam.
Moni mentioned our Hajj savings calculator. You can find that at our website, saturna.com. More specifically, the URL is saturna.com/amana/investing-4-Hajj. That's saturna.com/amana/investing-4-Hajj. Please consider an investment's objectives, risks, charges, and expenses carefully before investing. To obtain this and other important information about the Amana Funds in a current prospectus or summary prospectus, please visit amanafunds.com or call toll-free 1-800-728-8762. Please read the prospectus or summary prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the risk that you could lose money. The Amana Funds limit the securities they purchase to those consistent with Islamic and sustainable principles. This limits opportunities and may affect performance. This material is for general information only and is not a research report or commentary on any investment products offered by Saturna Capital. This material should not be construed as an offer to sell or the solicitation of an offer to buy any security in any jurisdiction where such an offer or solicitation would be illegal. We do not provide tax, accounting, or legal advice to our clients, and all investors are advised to consult with their tax, accounting, or legal advisors regarding any potential investment. Investors should not assume that investments in the securities and/or sectors described were or will be profitable. This podcast is prepared based on information Saturna Capital deems reliable. However, Saturna Capital does not warrant the accuracy or completeness of the information. Investors should consult with a financial advisor prior to making an investment decision. The views and information discussed in this commentary are at a specific point in time, are subject to change, and may not reflect the views of the firm as a whole. All material presented in this publication, unless specifically indicated otherwise, is under copyright to Saturna. No part of this publication may be altered in any way, copied, or distributed without the prior express written permission of Saturna Capital. IRA distributions before age 59 and a half may be subject to a 10% penalty. IRA distributions may be taxable. While there are no account fees for IRA accounts, ongoing investments in mutual funds are subject to expenses. See the prospectus for further details.